Hi, everyone. Welcome to Advanced Life Skills Breaking Free from Habitual Patterns. I am Dawn, also known as Belet Dawn, and I am from the presenting couple, Dan and Dawn. A couple of little disclaimers and then just a touch more about me. So I am recording, so please stay on mute. And then at the end, we'll do the questions and answers, which usually has a lot of great information as well, but that part's not recorded. I like to let everyone know that I teach from experience. I've used all of the tools that I share with people. So I have stories about them, I have experience with them, I have positive experience with them. So that is what I like to share. There may be naughty language just because I only advertise this on FET. With this class, I kind of doubt it, but it may slip out. So just a heads up about that. All right, so there's our disclaimers. Like I said, my name is Dawn, and I've been presenting since about 2004, but I've been using these tools, some of them since the late 90s, when I saw that I had some habits and some habitual reactions that I needed to change. So, been doing this for a long time. I've taught this to my spiritual group and other spiritual groups. My earliest notes on this I'm seeing from 2003. I'm also the co-author of a couple of books because you'll usually see me in the power exchange, polyamory, sacred sex communities, and our books are on power exchange and then some on polyamory, where the polyamory toolkit, that is where some of these tools can be found. Actually, both books, the polyamory toolkit and hearts and collars. We talk about these tools all the time because they were major for us to develop the relationship that we have. I'm also the co-host of the Erotic Awakening podcast, 15 years old, almost 700 shows. I think we may have talked about this on there as well. And then everything I do can be found on eroticawakening.com. So, yay. I try to keep this short, but I also warn people, been doing this for 25 years. I keep doing more stuff, therefore it gets longer. I try to make it shorter. So there we go. Okay, so I am assuming that you guys want to be here on this class because you have some habits or some habitual patterns that you want to break or fix or modify or whatever language it is that you want to use. They're usually negative patterns. I mean, why would we want to change positive patterns? So that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, usually I give this information about reactionary emotions, reactionary responses to emotions, but there's also habits that are about craving something, cigarette smoking, drugs, alcohol, sex, anything, video games, TV, all that stuff. If that is why you are here, I'll be focusing more on reactionary emotions, but all of these tools can be used for breaking habits like cigarette smoking and things like that as well. So keep that in mind and kind of tweak this information. Try to pull out pieces that speak to you and seem like they might work for you, and then do a little more digging on those topics. Now, I can talk fast, share stories fast. Sometimes my stuff can feel like a fire hose, but that's because I'm offering it in an hour time frame, which is as long as I can sit still for to do a Zoom. So I can do much longer if I'm standing up in front of a class and bantering with Dan and we're going back and forth and getting all that energy. An hour is about all I've got for the Zoom, but I love to put this information out there, and this is the easiest way to do it. So here we go. So breaking habitual patterns really became important to me when I started my healing path. And that was about, wow, my healing path. I probably started on that when I came to Ohio, which was back in 93. And I joined a mother's group. I had very young children at the time. And I joined a mother's group, and they asked me to describe myself in one word. And the only thing that I could think of was the word numb. So I lived in a numb bubble. And pretty much the only emotion that could get through was anger, which means I wasn't responding to a lot of stuff unless it was an angry response. And then I saw my kids picking up that habit, right? So I went to therapy and I tried a couple of things that they taught me, but it was mostly talk therapy and past trauma, let's dig shit up therapy, which didn't really work for me. So over time, I learned new things. And about 99, um, big things happened in my life to where some of you guys have heard the story before on some of my other classes, but big things happened in my life and change needed to happen. My healing path took on a deep dive and I had to fix some things in my head and in my life to be able to move forward. So here we go with breaking habitual patterns, right? My oldest son, like I said, he was very much copying my reactive states. Dan had just gone, no, his rehab was 10 years before that. So I watched Dan quit drugs, quit alcohol, quit smoking, all that type of stuff. And I was just wanting those sort of tools in my life because I wasn't raised around stuff like that. This was all new for me. So Dan had learned some tools in rehab and through his recovery time, and he shared some of those with me. And then over the last 25 years, I've discovered more. And there's two that I try my best to share with people. And those are going to be the first two I cover this time instead of the last two, like some of our workshops, because I want to make sure that I get those covered. So, with habits, not just the habitual reactions, which, like I said, I'll spend most of my time on, with habits, try to remember that, like with smoking, it's not that you want to smoke. You usually have a craving for what smoking provides. Video games, you have a craving for what that provides. For me, when I play video games, I want to detach from the world. I don't want anything around me to be around me. I want to immerse myself in that world. Same with TV. It's all about detaching. One of my sons says that he hates the idea that he smokes because he knows his clothes smell. He can't date people that don't want to be around a smoker, but it's a stress relief. And if he could just find another stress relief, that's going to be your trick behind habits like that you want to break. Figure out what the craving is for, and then figure out something to replace it with that will provide the same, fix the same craving, right? Or we get rid of the craving altogether. Now, with reactionary habits, those habitual patterns, how we react to something, those other habits could absolutely be involved in this as well. So let's focus on the reactionary emotions, okay, and what we do with that. So with these tools I'm getting ready to share with you, I have learned how to break my anger response mostly. I have learned how to break my depression response mostly. I've learned how to break my jealousy response mostly. I've changed my eating habits and I've changed my exercise habits and lots of things like that. And the reason I say mostly is because some of these reactionary patterns is based on deep rooted past trauma, okay, from past things. And sometimes it is hard because we were wired in response to that trauma. And I'm not saying everybody has a traumatic background, I'm just talking about me. Now, I'm also very happy with the idea that I have mostly broken these cycles. Because what happens instead is that I have learned to feel my body reaction And I've learned to feel that pause that happens before I have a physical reaction. And I'll go over that in just a minute. Okay. So what I mean by a body reaction is that if I'm getting ready to respond in a negative way, there's a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I notice. And when I notice that feeling in the pit of my stomach, I know that that is a reaction to something that's not in the present, if that makes sense, right? So in the pit of my belly. So let's say, I don't know, let's say someone tells, oh, I just remembered a reaction I had over the winter, so maybe I'll go into that. But oh, I need to add that to the notes. Damn it. I thought I was almost done with these reactions, but no, I did have a major one over the winter. The bucket. I'll remember to talk about the bucket. But anyway, let's say someone said, Dawn, we don't want you to present at whatever event. I'm going to have a reaction. And the first place I'm going to feel that reaction is in my gut. And what my gut is going to tell me is that I'm not in the present, right? So that hard knot in my gut is going to tell me, whoa, I'm getting ready to have a reaction that's based on something in the past. It's probably based on my thing about rejection, right? I had rejection issues before I knew rejection issues was a thing. And once I can track it back to that, then I can reframe things in my thinking, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and get myself settled down so that I don't have an angry outburst where I'm yelling at everybody. Right. And that's happened in the past. That's been that response of, oh my God, nobody likes me, or I'm not going to present anymore, which is a bad one because I love to present, and all that type of stuff. And if I can pause enough to feel that feeling in my belly, then I can go, or I can reframe it and I can go, and it's different than sour grapes, right? It's not, oh, well, I didn't want to present for them anyway. No, it's more of a, oh, hey, maybe they're rotating the presenters this year. Maybe we don't offer the topic that they're looking for. Maybe we're supposed to be doing something else and the universe is looking out for us. Something like that. So you learn how to reframe it. You can even turn it into a learning lesson. We've definitely turned some of our stuff into learning lessons. Great, another fucking learning lesson. So we get those every now and then. But let me talk about, should I mention the bucket now while I'm thinking of it? I'm going to mention the bucket now while I'm thinking of it because I had no clue I was going to talk about this. So over the winter, we were parked down in Arizona, and I was on the cleaning crew of the RV site because that paid for our spot in the RV park. So 4 o'clock in the morning, I would go clean the bathrooms, the showers, the rec room, the laundry room, everything like that. No big deal, right? 4 o'clock in the morning because Dan's on East Coast time, which means that was 6 o'clock his time. So I was going to be up anyway. Not a problem. Well, during the end of the 4 months that we were there was a little bit of staff change up. And one of the people there, I'm not going to assign emotions to how she felt because I'm not actually sure. I can have a guess, but that's about it. Anyway, all I know is that for me to do my job at 4 o'clock in the morning with my ADHD brain, I had to find a focus to keep me on track. And the focus that I bought was a bucket. And I bought my bucket and I put my name on it and I put flowers on it. And it was my bucket and it said Dawn. And I put it up on the shelf and I put my cleaning supplies in it. And every morning I walked into that room, that little closet, and I got my bucket and I jammed my music and bam, I'm focused and I could get my work done in half the time of anybody else. Right? So I'm great. Well, little change of staff. I go into the closet. My bucket's gone. My bucket has been there for 4 months. Everybody knows about my bucket. My bucket's gone. Dawn had an emotional reaction that if you guys knew me, you would run for the hills. This is not how New dawn has learned how to respond to the world, but someone stole my bucket. And I won't even go into details of, at least I was in that building by myself. So my anger was not directed at anybody. I find it funny now. It was horrendous then because I knew I was behaving out of character. I knew it was a trigger. Holy, it was a trigger like over a bucket. And I come into the RV. I finally found my bucket. Someone else had crossed out my name and wrote their name on it and put their cleaning supplies in it. So I had my bucket when I came into the RV. And I think Dan felt the storm walk into the door. And he turned around and he saw my face and he took off his headset. And I said, so I'm about to explode, and you're the first person I've seen. So don't take it personally, but please let me explode. And he's like, okay, I'm prepared. And I went off. I'm like, my bucket, my name, look at this thing, and I'm just going, and I'm like, but I know this is an emotional response that is 100 times bigger than it needs to be over this bucket. Now, you guys may understand why I was upset, but you probably wouldn't understand, or maybe you do, why I was so angry and wanted to go throw that bucket in the person's yard. I wanted to go wake her up at 5 o'clock in the morning and ask her who she thought she was. Some of that stuff can be a little dangerous, right? People own guns. People don't respond well to that kind of anger, right? I could have put us in a dangerous position with my response. So Dan was able to talk me through it. He's like, "Do you feel that feeling in the pit of your stomach?" Yes, I do. He's like, "Then you know your emotional response is based on something in the past." I'm like, "Yes, yes, I do." So he was able to talk me down and to get me to breathe through it. But that was one of those moments, man, that is the first time that has happened in like 10 years because I'm usually on top of things. I'm usually on top of my emotions. I'm usually very good at turning things into learning experiences and and all that stuff that has helped me survive the years. But that bucket, man, Dan doesn't bring up that bucket when we're talking anymore because I still get some of that rage of how dare she, and not how I want to respond to the world. That sort of reaction causes suffering. And I've worked very hard to pull myself out of the suffering phase of my life, right? So, anyway, the bucket. So, the first thing I'm going to teach you is how to break a habitual pattern. Um, oh my gosh, yes, I did not like that automatic reaction to that moment. So, what is a habitual pattern? So, I gave you a really good story that kind of described a habitual pattern. Like I said, it's a defense mechanism. Sometimes it's based on fear, sometimes it's based on rejection issues. It's usually based on a past reaction, a past situation. It can be pretty automatic without thinking. I mean, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you have an automatic, a lot of people have automatic reactions of how they respond to that because they respond in anger and fear and someone cut me off, and it could be everything from flipping someone the bird to jamming on the horn to whatever. um One of the things though is that it is an enemy to being mindful and present, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. So why learn to break habitual patterns? Like I said, I don't like that automatic response. I am a control freak and I like to have a little more control over my emotions. The people around me like me to have a little more control over my emotions. Okay. I didn't want reactions to the present that were created because of the past to control my present. So that was a big one for me. And when you change your habits, you're making a conscious choice to change your habits. You're making a conscious choice to be, I'm going to use the word a better person, to be more of who you want to be and how you want to react. One of the examples I use is that I don't like being jealous. That is a habitual pattern for me, or it was. I don't like how it makes me feel. I don't like how it makes other people around me feel. I don't like that it was a first emotional response to some specific things. I wanted options. And you don't really have options if you're stuck in that pattern and you don't know how to slow your brain down enough to get you out of that pattern. Okay. So I would, in my jealous moments, to fix it the first time, to fix it originally, I would detach. And that's not a good place to be either. So detaching from the world is not how I want to experience life. So I decided I wanted to react differently. And funny enough, that is when Dan started looking at Buddhism, and I ended up going on a retreat, a Buddhist retreat by myself. And something that the teacher taught me is just something that will stick with me forever. And it is the steps I'm getting ready to share with you. So, another reason to get rid of some of these habitual patterns, like I said, I talked about a trigger. So, this is working on collapsing triggers so that they are not so powerful. It works on rewiring the brain, right? So that things don't travel the same circuits and you can come up with other options. It helps my emotions and my logic line up. When I'm triggered, and I just talked about this on FET today, trigger does not mean uncomfortable. If you have ever been triggered or been around someone that is triggered, you will recognize the difference. Okay. For me, when I am triggered, my logic and my emotions are not lined up. For me, my emotions are totally in control, and it is not about anything to do with the present. It is a reaction to something else. If I can slow my brain down enough so that I can line those two up and logic can have a little more voice, pulls me right out of that moment. Okay. We can release the stories that keep us trapped, and it teaches us how to find the pause button. So, whether it's a reactionary emotion, whether it's a habit like smoking or video games or whatever, like I said before, the whole point, the whole thing that you're looking for to help make that change is that pause before action. Okay. So I've learned some of these methods through Buddhism, through my psychology degree, through my therapy, through my pagan path, just teachers and friends. And sometimes I'll need something and the universe just seems to provide. I just need to be open to hearing it. And that's what happens a lot. Let's go over the first tool that I'm going to be teaching you. And like I said, we talk about this in the polyamory toolkit and hearts and collars because it's been so powerful. So think of each action as having 5 steps. Now, I will actually write these 5 things down in the email that I send to you with the recording. So feel free to write them down. Feel free to just have it in the recording. I actually found this, and the teacher that taught it to me and Dan, there is a Buddhist book out there. See if I can remember the name of it. It was WUTL, Wake Up to Your Life. And this is actually in that book. Okay. And that's where that teacher learned it from. So there are 5 steps that happen with every reaction that you have: positive, negative, neutral, whatever. Every reaction has these 5 steps. So first, there's a sensory stimuli. Okay. So let's say I just cooked bacon. Bacon is the sensory stimuli, right? There's no way around that sensory stimuli unless you're missing one of your senses, right? So, if you're missing sight, then sight isn't going to be a stimuli, but you have other. other senses. So sensory stimuli. I've cooked bacon. I've walked in the RV with a pan of bacon. Dan smells the bacon. Dan decides to eat the bacon. Okay. Now, before you go from your sensory stimuli, and then you've got your action or your reaction, where there's three more steps in there. Okay. So he smelled the bacon. Then he had a feeling tone. So feeling tone is number two. Feeling tone is negative, positive, or neutral. He had a positive reaction to that bacon. Okay. Well, then step three is he interpreted that response. His interpretation was yum, good bacon, let's eat, right? His emotional response was happiness and joy. He gets to eat the bacon. And then his action was eating the bacon. Okay. So those are your five steps. You've got sensory stimuli. Something has happened. You've smelled something, seen something, heard something, tasted something, because taste can do that as well. Feeling, just literally kinetic touch, can also be a stimuli. It is a stimuli. Well, it's going to cause a feeling tone. It's going to cause you to feel positive, negative, or neutral. The example Dan likes to use is he'll hold up his phone. And it used to be that if you held up an iPhone, that would give one response. This is my flip phone, which could give a different response, right? So whenever I do this, that usually gives people a response like, oh, fuck, what'd you do? Because it folds. If I go to fold someone's phone, like Dan's, by accident, he has a response. He's like, don't fold my phone. It's not a flip phone. So you've got sensory stimuli. You've got that feeling tone, negative, positive, neutral. Sometimes a physical reaction could happen here as well. This is where the feeling in the pit of my belly starts. This is the feeling tone. Then I interpret that feeling tone. I interpret that negative feeling, that positive feeling. Okay. Or those two can be flipped depending who you are. Kevin, our friend Kevin, was a psychologist. And the first time he heard us teach this, he's like, oh no, I teach it sensory stimuli, interpretation, and then feeling tone. Either way, sensory, the way I'm doing it is sensory, feeling tone, and then interpretation of that feeling tone. Then you have an emotional response, and then you have an action or a reaction. Okay. Boss gives someone a promotion that you wanted, you have a negative feeling to that, you interpret it as I'm no good or they don't like me. The emotional response could be angry or sad. If it's angry, it could be an instant punching of the wall or flipping a desk or maybe something not that loud, but some sort of reaction. Maybe it makes you depressed and then you bring that home from work. Anything like that. It could cause a wham moment, which I talk about in the books and on some classes. And wham is my phrase that goes through my head when I get triggered, and that is what about me? Okay. If I didn't get that job, I would instantly fall into, well, what about me? What did I do wrong? What did whatever, whatever happens with that. If my head starts going, what about me? I know my reaction is not based on the present moment. And I want my reactions to be based on current, present, actual things going on in the moment. So my goal with knowing these five things, right? I don't want the reaction to happen. Okay. I want to be in control of that reaction. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I want my reaction to be take a deep breath, reframe it. Maybe they're going to the hospital, not trying to run me personally off the road, right? That's what I want my reaction to be. I want to change that reaction. Well, I can't change it if I don't know that there's three other things going on here. So the trick is to find that pause that covers those three things. So we can't usually stop the sensory stimuli unless we're living in a cave like a monk. right? So that's their purpose. They're trying to get rid of sensations so that they can just go into their mind. We have all these things happening to us all the time. We react to these things all the time. So what's going on in the middle? Now, my goal is to catch this at number 2. I want to catch this at feeling tone, which is negative, positive, neutral. I would love for everything to be positive. I'm okay with things being neutral. I'm okay with some things being negative. There should be a negative response to some things. I just don't want it to be the out of control negative response. I want some power behind it. I want some thought behind it, not just reaction. Okay. Now, it takes a lot of work to get to point 2. So I'm going to start way back here at 5. I'm going to start with my reaction. Now, to do that, you need to slow down your brain so that you can see these other 3 things, or at least catch it before it happens. If Dawn had been doing her meditation practice, I may not have thrown that chair when someone stole my bucket. I'm trying to get to where I don't have that reaction happen. So the first thing is to see, to feel. For me, it's a feeling, to feel that that's getting ready to happen and stop it. But you have to slow down the brain. My meditation practice is what helps me with that. So I do mindful meditation, and sometimes it's only 10 minutes a day. And it doesn't have to be mindful meditation. That's the one that works for me. And that's the one where I sit for 10 minutes. I see a story start in my head. I realize there's a story going on in my head. I come back to feeling the air on my lip as I breathe. I bring my focus to that. And then I sit and wait for the other story to start, because with the way my brain works, stories will continue to start. I realize there's a story. I stop the story. I come back to the breath. Next story starts. I realize there's a story. I stop it. I come back to the breath over and over and over again. I don't need to be in a quiet space, because if I hear the clock, if I hear Dan's keyboard, if I hear, I don't know, birds outside, great. It means I'm in the moment and not in a story. So to me, all of that is success in that 10 minutes. Training my brain to do that and to see the story, stop the story, come back to the moment, because you can only breathe in the present, right? Feel that air on your lip. Doing that over and over and over again gives me the skill to do it when I'm not in meditation. It trains the brain to slow down and be present. And when you can do that, you can feel that moment before you are getting ready to react, before you're getting ready to pick up that piece of food, the cigarette, the video game controller, whatever. You can feel that moment and you can make a choice. Okay. Now, once you feel the moment right before the reaction, wait, 5, right before the reaction, then you can start trying to feel for the one before that, which is the emotional response. Okay. If I could have stopped that anger, I could have stopped the reaction. I look for that pause. That one's a little harder. And then before that is the interpretation. If I can catch it before the interpretation, the game has completely changed. If the second one is feeling tone and I'm feeling negative about this, and then I have the interpretation of, oh, wait, someone doesn't like me, someone's trying to whatever. If I can change the interpretation, that gets me almost all the way back to the second step. So again, 5 steps. We only see 2. We only see 1 sometimes, right? We don't even know sometimes what the sensory stimuli is that popped us to number 5, which is the reaction. So we slow down the brain. Sensory stimuli, feeling tone, which is negative, positive, or neutral, interpretation of that feeling tone, the why, the emotional response, and then the reaction. So if we can slow all that down so that we can see those 5 steps, amazing progress can be made. So that was very powerful when we learned that. And it takes time. Once you've learned this, I mean, think of how powerful just this knowledge is. Whoa, there's 5 steps. I have a choice of how I react now. Now, Dawn's going to give you some tools on how to get this to work for you. Okay. So, like I said, the first one is meditation. I highly recommend meditation. And you literally only have to sit still for 10 minutes a day. Mindful meditation, there's all kinds of meditation. It's all about training your brain to slow down and pay attention. So it can be mindful meditation, mindless meditation, movement meditation, like walking meditation, guided meditation. I've facilitated and been part of hundreds of guided meditations, and they are so easy to find now on YouTube. Just search 10-minute guided meditation. You will come up with hundreds of options. Find a voice that works for you. Not everyone's going to vibe with you. Some are too high, some too low, some too fast, whatever. Figure out what works for you and try to do that. Let them talk you through a landscape that helps you be mindful, right? You'll be mindful of the words that they're using. So any type of meditation, journeying, all kinds of stuff. Yoga, holy cow. Yoga is a form of meditation that is very powerful and in the moment. The other thing that I use a lot, and it's funny because the friend that taught me this was supposed to be on tonight's call, and I don't see her, but that would have been kind of cool. She would have seen that I was talking about something that she taught me that's been so powerful. This one's called manual mode. So a manual mode is manual mode for me is about making the decision not to react a certain way. As in, Dan, literal thing happened. I was having issues with jealousy. When Dan would tell me he was getting ready to do something with a new partner, my automatic reaction was, what about me and jealousy and how does that affect me and didn't you think of me and and all that stuff that told me that it was a trigger response. And I didn't like that. And my friend told me about this thing called manual mode. And she's like, you feel that feeling in the pit of your stomach, you take a deep breath and you go inside for just a little bit. You go inside for just a little bit. Because, like I said, when that happens to me, when I have that response, it means my logic and my emotions went whoop, and emotions became in charge. So I take that breath. And as an external processor, that was a little difficult to learn, but I learned it. So Dan comes home and he's like, so me and Karen just had a talk and we're going to go on a cruise. And I felt that blip in my stomach. I felt the words get ready to come out. And instead, I took a conscious breath and just sat for a second. And Dan had to check in with me because that's not the response he's used to, right? So he had to check in with me and he's like, so are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, manual mode. Give me just a second. And that's now one of our words that both of us might use if we've had a blip, which is what we call it. If we've had a little blip, we take that breath automatically and then remember to go in and talk to ourselves, try to reframe things so that we can line that all up. And it's been amazingly powerful because that means instead of reacting, I'm choosing how I'm reacting, right? I feel that physical reaction. I feel those words getting ready to fall out of my face very loudly, which is going to put Dan on the defensive, which means now communication can't happen. I feel that and I make that choice to go inside and I talk to myself and I reframe what's going on. Okay. So reframing is basically changing the story, right, of what's going on. It's very powerful stuff. Many of us have probably already figured out how to do this. This is the positive self-talk and things like that. So some of us may have already learned how to do it and not even know what it is. Continue to incorporate that into your life, changing the story, reframing. Okay. So with that one, manual mode has helped me a lot in figuring out between step 4 and step 5 and even step 3 and step 4. And like I said, that those steps make more sense when I send them to you in the email. So, yeah, my goal, and sometimes I can do this, is to catch myself at feeling tone. If I can catch myself at feeling tone, ooh, I've had a negative feeling about this, before it even gets to the interpretation, that is where I'm a happy camper. So lots of time invested in that one. Okay, so reframing. Um, Dan and I do this all the time. So let's say that someone else got the position at work that you were wanting, right? You can reframe that. And again, it's not the negative, oh, well, I didn't want it anyway. It's the sitting there and working through it of taking that breath, realizing it's a negative feeling tone, knowing that you don't want the depression, the anger, the whatever to be the response. So you look at the negativity and you reframe it as in, hmm, maybe the universe has something else in store for me. Oh, look, that frees up. Okay, Dan and I did not win the international title, the MS international title. We were already thick into this 5-step process and reframing. We already had those tools. So when we did not win, we won the regional, and that was fun. And we went to international and we did not win international. We were able to look at that and go, you know what? That frees up our time. Now we can write that book we've been wanting to write. And that's how Living MS got put out. We had the time to do that instead of being tied into a title year where someone else would have been in charge of who we presented for and what information we put out there. So we were able to, wonder what the universe has in store. Well, look at that. After a little bit of boo-hooing, we were able to reframe that. What else happened? I feel like something else just popped into my head that was a huge, oh, the car accident last year. So last year we had a big accident in where we totaled everything. We felt the reactions settling in our bodies. And some of you know about this accident. Some of you have personally seen the results of my reaction to some of this accident. But what we were able to do was to feel those reactions happening, feel the fear and all of that stuff bubbling up, noticing that's what was happening, and then flipping it and looking at all the positive stuff that happened. So even though it was a bad day and a bad time, it was a couple of months before we got everything straightened out so we could get back on the road. We felt all that happening, and we were able to make other choices. We were able to go, oh, look, we didn't hit any other cars. No other cars hit us. Neither one of us actually got hurt, and figuring that out. So looking at the positive stuff. And it's not toxic positivity. That's not what I'm trying to say here. It's more about making the choice of how you react, making the choice in your habits, right? Instead of letting your habits and your habitual reactions control you. That's all of this that I'm talking about. So reframing, instead of saying I'm scared to go on that section of road that we're going to be going on at the same time this year as last year, instead of saying, and feeling all that fear and feeling all that stuff and letting it control me, I reframe it. I'm like, okay, I've got that feeling. I know what's going on. So let's reframe this. Everything that could go right that day, on a day when so much went wrong, went right. None of us got hurt. I'd actually like to go past that piece of road and say thank you to the boulder that kept more damage from happening. So, right, I want to say thank you to that boulder that put us back on the right path and lining everything up so that it wasn't worse than what it could be. I don't eat sugar now. This is on topic. I don't eat sugar now. It has been 18 months since I've had sugar, which means I don't eat ice cream, which used to be an every night habit, right? We would find, oh my God, there's so many ice cream places around here, little mom and pop ice cream places. We used to ride our motorcycles to go find ice cream places, things like that. I don't do that anymore. I've had to switch and reframe it. And the way I've reframed it, you do what works for you, but the way I reframed it was sugar is poison and companies are trying to make a buck off my addiction, right? When I walk and I have to walk near processed foods, I'm like, nope, because those processed foods are about the bottom line for the company. There's no nutritional value in what they're providing for me. And they literally put stuff in the foods to make me addicted to said foods. So they are trying to make money off of my addictive personality. And that works for me. I don't want to put poison in my body and I don't want them to make a buck off of me. So that's a way to flip your brain. With exercise, the way I reframe that is not I have to exercise, but that I'm able to exercise, which will help my future life. Because I don't just want to live long, I want to live long and be healthy enough to still be an RVer if I want to and to still enjoy life. So it's not just about length of life, it's about quality of life. So I am able to exercise right now. The truck that we have to pull this trailer is huge, and we park in the back of parking lots because that's the only place we fit. And I had to reframe that of going, oh my God, we got to park in the back of the parking lot again. Instead of I reframe that, and it's, ooh, because of this big truck, we are able to park in the back of the parking lot to get more steps in to help with future life. Reframe. So I absolutely love doing that. Okay, one more tool that I'm going to give you, and there's 25, 30 that I could give you, but I'm sticking to these basic ones. So there's one more I'm going to give you, and then we'll wrap up and go into questions and answers. So the next one that I love for this is called anchors. Remember I said that we were trying to collapse some of our anchors. We were trying to collapse some of our automatic responses to smells or sounds or whatever. Those smells, those sounds that we're reacting to, they can also be called anchors, which is why we call it collapsing anchors. Okay. Now, we can also create some anchors that can help us out. This is an anchor. My day collar, if I start getting a little nervous, you may see me do this, right? Sometimes when I'm talking, I will absolutely do this. If I'm watching my RV being backed up from out of the woods because we have to get ready to go down a gravel path again on the side of a mountain in Pennsylvania, you may see me do this as I see it come past the building. Okay, so nervous reaction, it's an anchor. I'm okay with this. There's some anchors I'm absolutely okay with. That is one. I carry a stone sometimes and I don't have it on me, but I have a stone that I carry when I get nervous. I have a stuffy that I carry when I get nervous. I'm okay with these anchors to help settle me emotionally. Perfectly fine. I'm also learning to create anchors through self-hypnosis. Okay, so it's a way of reacting to things by working with my brain. That's helping with the whole rewiring of the way I react to stuff that reminds me of the past. So self-hypnosis is phenomenal. I'm going to be teaching classes on that soon because everything I'm learning, it's just layering on stuff that I already know. So like with anxiety and stuff like that, I'm learning stuff that is really helping with that. So when I feel depressed, when I have anxiety, one of the things that I just got taught in my hypnosis certification class I've been doing for decades. So what happens is if I start feeling out of control or sad or angry or something like that, I would be in therapy and I would be holding my thumb. And I would be holding my thumb and my hands would be in my lap. And my therapist was like, Dawn, what are you doing with your thumb? And I'm like, I have no clue. She's like, pull them apart. And I would pull my thumb out and I would start crying. It's a way to detach. And now I'm learning in my classes on how to do that on purpose. If you get really emotional, grab your thumb. It's like a grounding technique. The other grounding technique that I have found that I learned from a 3-year-old was to stick your finger in your belly button. So that's another way to break the cycle of an out of control emotion is grounding with an anchor of your thumb or sticking your finger in your belly button. So how's that for a couple of tools? If I go, I'm not even tempted by ice cream anymore because it is so in my brain that that's poison for my body that if I was having problems with that still, I think I would use the thumb technique again. But because my therapist made me break it apart during therapy sessions, I notice when I do it now and I know I'm disconnecting. So I have to learn to pull it apart. So there's some tools that you can use, which is my whole purpose of this, right? Is sharing these tools for breaking habitual patterns. So now, me, a very jealous person, knock on wood, man, I am not looking for any lessons right now, but I'm not a jealous, reactive person anymore. If I feel a blip, I feel it in my body. I take that breath, I reframe, I come at it from how would I want Dan to respond if I told him something along the same lines and flipping my thinking, just changing the stories. I mean, all that stuff has been super powerful. I'm not an angry person anymore, regardless of the bucket. I'm not, um, I just don't react the way I used to. I don't have the triggered trauma reactions. It's just been very powerful for me. Anyway, I'm glad I could share that with you guys. So, everything I do, all my classes, the podcasts, the books, all of that stuff, the Discord channel, because we do have a Discord channel, we have a group of patrons. If you want to support the work we do, all of that can be found on eroticawakening.com.